Joining us now to break down that move is Alexandra Wilkes, an attorney and a spokesperson for the Day One Alliance, which focuses on the role that private sector plays in the corrections and detentions in the United States. So, Alexandra, I first want to focus really on what Joe Biden said. President Biden, of course, signing one of those executive orders, this one pertaining to private prisons. What exactly did that latest order attempt to do?
Well, thanks so much for having me. What President Biden said that the executive order did was it was supposed to help reduce mass incarceration. Unfortunately, that's just not the case with this executive order because our contractors actually have no role in driving the mass incarceration problem in this country. For one, the vast majority of the population of the Federal Bureau of Prisons are actually criminal aliens awaiting deportation at the end of their sentence. So these aren't even U.S. citizens that we're talking about here. And the private sector only makes up about 9% of the total prison population in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So they fail to focus on the 90% or so of inmates who are in government-run prisons, which is the driver of mass incarceration. But look, the private sector here is not a part of the problem. It's actually a part of the solution. And when you really look at the kind of cutting-edge programs and evidence-based programs that our contractors are able to offer, we're able to help give these men and women in our care a second start at life, whether that's our educational and vocational training, faith-based programs, substance abuse programs. Contractors should be seen as a tool and not an enemy in this fight.
That's a very interesting point because I have heard, for example, over the past 4 years, whether it be Republicans or Democrats, that there are people in jail that, quite frankly, should not be there. President Trump said that with his First Step Act. We've heard Democrats say that time over time. But now here we are at a point, and I heard a lot of people call this more of a platitude than anything else, citing exactly what you said, that, for example, not extending contracts with private prisons doesn't address the underlying fact of people coming into prison. It's more of a responsive or something that comes after the fact, rather than getting to the heart of the issue itself. Do you think that's true?
That's absolutely true because the bottom line is that the contractors have no say about who comes into our care. That decision is solely made by the government, whether it's prosecutors and judges and the judicial system. That has nothing to do with us. We're on the receiving end of the people who are coming into the system. But like I said, our organizations are able to offer cutting edge care and are able to do so efficiently and effectively. Try getting a giant bureaucracy to be able to change pace to address a growing issue, whereas our companies and organizations can nimbly meet those demands because of the fact that it is the private sector.
And, I do want to focus on exactly what the rationale was behind this decision as well. Of course, we heard not only Joe Biden say it, but we also heard Susan Rice say that it's really at the heart of racial equality is what they're looking to achieve. And in doing so, they cited this 2016 Justice Department report. But I've noticed that even critics say that that justification within itself is flawed. The rationale behind this is flawed. It doesn't only not achieve the means of what they're trying to achieve, but some of the data that goes into it may not be accurate as well either. Is that true?
Absolutely. And actually, the Department of Justice warned specifically when they released that report, which we do agree is flawed, that you cannot use that data to compare the private sector with the government-run prisons. So there just wasn't enough data to make those kinds of comparisons. But if you do drill down into that data, it does show that the contractor-operated facilities are at least as safe and secure and humane as the government-run facilities, and they actually experience lower rates of inmate deaths, sexual assaults, positive drug tests, and other issues. Something to keep in mind is that when the private sector is involved here, it enters into a contract with the government. Every single thing from the meals that are given to the men and women in our care to the programs that are offered, this is all stipulated by contract. And there is a ton of oversight and compliance that goes into making sure that our side is living up to our end of the bargain.
And as you've been laying out, too, I've noticed that this only applies to private prisons. It's something that the executive order is very explicit about. And as you've laid out, too, it's not necessarily addressing the majority of inmates in this country. As you said, most of them are in governmental prisons. Is there a reason why this only applies to private prisons, whereas it seems like under an executive order, this seems like something that would be within the power of the Biden administration to exert on other public agencies that fall within the executive branch?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what happened here is that this has been a favorite talking point with activists, unfortunately rooted in some deeply held misinformation out there. And this was a campaign promise that the president made. But what I think that the president should realize is what Republicans and Democrats have realized in working with the private industry for over 30 years to solve dangerous overcrowding situations and other conditions, that are poor, which is that the contractor should be used as a tool. And look, in removing this tool from the toolbox, what the Biden administration has done is it's made it difficult to, like I said, more nimbly respond to problems, to be able to reduce overcrowding and unsafe conditions. So, leaders from both parties over the last couple of decades have recognized the utility and the great benefit that our industry provides. And, the hope is that we can continue to educate going forward.
Yeah, and as we've already seen, it appears that this administration has no problem using those executive orders, things that would seem to fall underneath his purview. So something tells me that this might not be the first plan of action that we see, maybe in regard to private prisons and things of that nature, but something tells me that we might see more actions in the horizon. But Alexandra Wilkes, I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight and breaking down this issue. Thank you.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
It's still ahead.